The next speaker on the list is going to address this issue of masculinity that you heard Dr. Morrison address in her topic as well. So to do that, we have Dr. Shane Joseph, who's a social worker, psychotherapist, and consultant. He's also the CEO of Roots Community Services. Shane is a registered social worker, psychotherapist with over 20 years of wisdom in the areas of masculinity, gender-based violence, program and policy development, suicide interventions, and mental health. Within private capacity, he provides the Caribbean, North and South, Central America, Asia, Europe, and Africa. He lectures at both colleges and university levels and currently works as the Associate Executive Director at Roots Community Services. He possesses an undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees in social work as well as an MBA. So I'd like you to introduce Dr. Shane Joseph.
Thank you very much, Ken. Good. Is it morning still? It's afternoon now. It's so good to be here with you in person. And just yesterday, I drove down from Ottawa last night. Masculinity, health, prostate, and all of the good things. I am coming here with you today from the lens of a clinician, which is this is what I do. And every single day when I'm placed into the room to do therapy, psychodynamics, whatever it might be, I'm always encountering it, not only from the medical side, from the referrals, because there are so many different dimensions. But I'll take you through a narrative that I've prepared, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as I can. When I look at the particular topic that we're sharing here today, I can say to you that after the COVID period, we have seen fortunately, a lot more men are now seeking therapy. We're in church, somebody said, Amen. Because, it is like a miracle we have been waiting for. It is like eucalyptus in the nasal part. We can even breathe to see a man coming for therapy. And I tell you, it is such a joy when they're coming there, because oftentimes it is not only a one-off, but I make sure that I get everything that I need to get done, just in case they say they're not coming back, because it might just be a one-time piece. But I can tell you, over the years, I've seen increasingly individuals, because I do grief and loss as well, especially when they're given the first diagnosis. They think, I've been diagnosed with, I'm going to die tomorrow. And I'm like, you're not going to die? You think you're going to have so much years to go still? And so we begin to talk about those pieces, and especially not just when there's issues around prostate and around these kinds of challenges, but when individuals have other complications like, diabetes and hypertension. And we intersect that as well. As we know in the Caribbean, we don't call you, say, sugar, or the pressure high. And we begin to look at other issues around separation and divorce and children and all of those pieces. I will take you through today looking at the role of masculinity, and I currently chair the North America Men Engage, which is the body that works with all men across Canada and the US. And what we try to do is to unpack this issue around masculinity, and today I will connect it very quickly with how we connect it with health issues. So as we move forward, keep going. Next slide. I want to ensure this one, that as we move forward, just quickly, right where you are, I just want you to do a quick mood check. I'm a clinician, so I want to make sure everyone is still grounded. Looking at this chart, I want you to tell me, as you begin to look at yourself introspectively, How are you feeling at this moment? Having had the presentation, having eaten such a lovely lunch, are you feeling stressed, nervous, unsettled, active, relaxed, lovable, romantic, happy, tired, calm, or anything outside of that? And very quickly, I just want you to turn to the person to your left or to your right and tell them how you're feeling based upon one of these or outside of that. Very quickly. Everybody feeling lovable today. All right, let's go. At the end of my presentation, I'm hoping that we can have an interactive dialogue, talking particularly about the men and how we can define masculinity. And at the end of that, I hope to bring three main pieces in terms of the objectives. One, I want at the end of today's dialogue, we will be able to talk about masculinity. And then you hear in the big terms, people say toxic masculinity or hegemonic masculinity. I'm hoping that two, we'll be able to find an opportunity to really define that man box and look to see how we can encourage men to move outside. I'm telling you, about 4 months ago, I had a gentleman who came in for therapy with his wife. And she said we have been married for so much of years and everything is going well. And some difficulties with regards to the relationship dynamics. So I said to her, so tell me what is happening. And she looked at him, then he looked at her, then she looked at him. And I said, so tell me what is happening, sir, what's going on? And by the time we get into the pieces, we will do something we call the biopsychosocial analysis to find out the background. And I said to him, tell me a little bit about your growing up. What was it like? And who did you get your mentorship from as it relates to how you learn to be a man? I said, are you okay? He said, and I'm telling you, by the time I started with that, there was a mixture of anger, frustration, and he cried for half an hour. And at the end of the half an hour, I said, it's okay, we can still talk about the very same question. We wrapped up the therapy by him apologizing on email, apologizing on voicemail, because he stood in front of this big black man here and cried for 20 minutes. And I even had to remind him, I said, snot also came from your nose. You cried so much, I couldn't see it. And you look kind of nice even when you cry. And we talk about, but as you would know and you understand, when we work with men, these are not pieces you will normally see because men believe men should not cry. I'm a strong man. These are the kind of things that we are taught when you're growing up and the kind of way in which a man is expected to behave. And we call that, from the sociological term, the man box. And I'll show you a very good video. Keep moving. A very good video with my friend in the US, whose name is Tony Porter, who does work extensively with men. And in that space, and so these are the objectives we'll complete. When we finish those today, we'll be in a better place, keep moving, to begin to analyze the pieces. I want to ask you this question. Number one, when we hear the term masculinity, what comes to mind for us?
Strength.
Strength.
Vigor.
Vigor. Dominance. Vulnerability. Do you hear the language?
Yeah.
Do you hear how strong it is?
Yeah.
Right, I want you to hold on to that. Number two, as we reflect on how does masculinity impact men and black men in particular?
Ego.
Ego. You hear it? Ego. She said that attitude. Ego. You see it? So, tell us more. When we talk about masculinity and how it impacts men, what are we talking about again?
Pride.
Oh God, pride. Anybody else want to default to that?
Responsibility.
Responsibility. Manliness. Anything outside of manliness in a real man. So you because all right, we'll come to that. Let's go to the third one. How then do we support men on an everyday basis when we're talking about the issue of masculinity and health? Take a look in this particular, it's a vignette, it's a YouTube video, and I want you to pay particular attention around what this experience would mean for everyone. You should click it, it should be. One second, please. Very good. All right, we'll show you directly from the YouTube. It's a YouTube clip. Okay, here it comes. So this particular video that we're looking at, sorry about that. This particular video that we're looking at, all of the keys that come up for it. It is entitled The Hand. It's just about attention to it, and from there, the day of the night.
So I grew up in New York City, between Harlem and the Bronx.
And the gentleman who's
Growing up
writing
as
is a black
boy,
man. He
was
lives in
taught
New York
that
City, in
men
the
had to be
Bronx.
tough, had
And
to
he's
be
going to share with
strong,
you
had
his
to
own
be
individual
courageous,
experience
dominate,
as a man growing up.
no pain, no emotions, with the exception of anger and definitely no fear. That men are in charge, which means women are not. That men lead, and you should just follow and just do what we say. That men are superior, women are inferior. That men are strong, women are weak.
There you are.
So this is the world-renowned Tony Porter. We do a lot of work together, and you'll hear the pieces that he's mentioning in that space.
That women are of less value. So I grew up in New York City, between Harlem and the Bronx. Growing up as a boy, we was taught that men had to be tough, had to be strong, had to be courageous, dominating, no pain, no emotions, with the exception of anger and definitely no fear. That men are in charge, which means women are not. That men lead, and you should just follow and just do what we say. That men are superior, women are inferior. That men are strong, women are weak. That women are of less value. Property of men and objects, particularly sexual objects. I've later come to know that to be the collective socialization of men, better known as the man box. See, this man box has in it all the ingredients of how we define what it means to be a man. Now, I also want to say, without a doubt, there are some wonderful, wonderful, absolutely wonderful things about being a man. Well, at the same time, there's some stuff that's just straight up twisted. And we really need to begin to challenge, look at it, and really get in the process of deconstructing, redefining what we come to know as manhood. This is my two at home, Kendall and Jade. They're 11 and 12. Kendall's 15 months older than Jade. There's a period of time, you know, when my wife, her name is Tammy, and I, we just got real busy and whip it, bit, bam, boom, Kendall and Jade.
It's 9:15. How am I already underwater?
I'm in the same boat.
I'm in an actual boat.
I thought Grammarly just fixed grammar. They make boats now?
It's more of a metaphorical boat, because I've been using Grammarly's AI for years to keep me high and dry. Try it. Grammarly can look through your writing to make.
And when they were about 5 and 6, 4 and 5, you know, Jade could come to me. It didn't matter, come to me crying, you know. It didn't matter what she was crying about. She can get on my knees, she can snot my sleeve up, just cry it out. Daddy got you, that's all that's important. Now Kendall, on the other hand, and like I said, he's only 15 months older than her, he come to me crying. It's like soon as I would hear him crying, a clock would go off. You know, I would give the boy probably about 30 seconds, which means by the time he got to me, I was already saying things like, why you crying? Hold your head up. Look at me. Explain to me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong. I can't understand you while you're crying. And out of my own frustration of my role and responsibility of building him up as a man to fit into these guidelines and these structures that are defining this man box, I would find myself saying things like, just go in your room. Just go on in your room, sit down, get yourself together, and come back and talk to me when you could talk to me like a what? Like a man. And he's 5 years old. And you know, as I grow in life, I would say to myself, my God, what's wrong with me? What am I doing, you know? Why? To my father. There was a time in my life where we had a very troubled experience in our family. My brother Henry, he died tragically when we were teenagers. We lived in New York City, as I said, we lived in the Bronx at the time. And the burial was a place called Long Island. It was about 2 hours outside of the city.
Embedded in our psyche from the very beginning of growth and development.
When you say all of these big terminologies about embedded in our psyche from since growth, break it down for it, put it in the layman language.
Not showing emotion.
And when that father taught you to be a man, what did he teach you?
Similar to what this Tony.
So what Tony said, let's get some examples of some of the men who are here. What were you taught by your father or whoever was in the household about how to be a man? Don't cry. Don't cry. What else?
Suck it up.
Man up, suck it up. And here, pay particular attention to the language, eh? Man up, suck it up. Pay attention to what else?
Don't complain.
Don't complain. Stop it. You're talking. No, that's for girls. Be a man. Stop it and get over it. Listen and don't talk back. So stifle everything inside. Keep it internalized. What else will man talk? Be a provider. You are the main breadwinner. A man must go out there and work. He has to be strong, six-pack, looking good. This is what a man is. And this is what we are taught, because only in today's society, you're seeing a flip around the culture where men are now beginning to wear pink. Because if you are from the Caribbean and you wear pink, because you begin to look at how it is different. Even when men would grow up, and I see my brother there, I see the collar over it. You know, if you're in the Caribbean and you do that, you know, because we have all been placed, let's continue, into that man box that says to us, friends, today, as we begin to look at the issues, that men are placed in a box. And so men don't see that they need to come to therapy. Men don't see that they need to come forward to get access to unfeeling of their feelings and so forth. I'm going to come to that as well. And here what we say, the man box is telling us today, friends, that men should not cry openly. Men don't express anger. I have run the domestic violence program here for almost 18 years, and I can tell you, in the midst of anger, some of the things, like recently, I saw a gentleman, he was so upset because it was around Thanksgiving, and he got charged for assault with a weapon. And I'm like, what? Why are you here to me? He said, but during Thanksgiving, like we had pork in the house, pork pig, and she knew I don't want it in the house, so he threw it outside. And in throwing it outside, the gravy fell on her, and the gravy was the weapon. It sounds silly, but as we begin to understand it, there was another way I said to him that we could have dealt with that. But the internalization of the anger, the arrogance, the dominance, don't be like a woman. When we tell a man, and I'm going to bring that very straightforward to us, even those who are listening, you hear the term, stop being a pussy. Don't be a pussy, boy. Man up yourself. If you tell a man, don't be a pussy, what is it you're telling the man not to be? Don't be like a woman. So if you're telling him, don't be like a woman, and don't be like that pussy who's a woman, what are you telling him not to be?
Don't be weak.
Don't be weak.
Control your emotions.
Control your emotions. Don't be vulnerable. These are all the pieces. Don't be a gay man. Don't come and try as you're looking for help. Don't be in that place where be a real man. That is the man box that we've seen here. Keep going. And I'll type it later for you to see that they tell you act like a man. Because men are breadwinners. Men are supposed to be strong and angry and active and successful. And you're supposed to be able to know, how to have sex, how to cry, how not to cry, how to not to yell at people, because you're expected to be a man. Later on, as we tie this into that space, keep going, we realize here clearly that as we reflect on those exercises, we see there are many themes that have come out to us. But I do not want to zero in on the theme so much. I want to zero in on the very last question, you can keep going, that says to us, what are the disadvantages of pretending to be in that man box? And what are the advantages? And here in these slides, I will now connect you to why we are here today. Number one, when we look at the men and men's health, I want to let us know today that the traditional masculinity and vulnerability have taught us that that we are in a place whereby men's perception of strength is built on physique and not necessarily on mindset and courage and the softer skills. That is why when you see men you would meet in an accident or doing that thing, they begin to want to use aggression, come out to fight, and anger, because the amygdala, which then send message to the frontal lobe, is saying to this man, just show him who is in charge. Who is the baddest here? And what men have also been taught in the traditional masculinity is that you must have reluctance to express pain. So you have gone into that place and the doctor has said, I'm beginning to see that the prostate is enlarging in itself. And as a result, I want you to begin to have significant change in your diet. And then the doctor said, I'm also concerned about that AC1 because your blood sugar is also of concern. And the wife said, tell him the other thing. And he looks at me and she said, tell him the other thing. And you know what the other thing is? Yeah, there's also a problem with erectile functionality. The thing ain't standing upright. And as a result, men will be like, I'm a man, because he doesn't want to display that in the masculinity realm, a real man is this man, and trying to downplay everything is good with me, sir. I know to take care of myself. And I'm saying to us here today that what men will do is have the perception of strength, they will have the reluctance towards expressing the pain, and what they will do is suffer in silence. And that's the very reason why we are here today. When men come into me for therapy, whether it is around men's issues, relationship dynamics, divorce, and so, I said, you're going to be separated. I said to a guy that this week, you'll be separated from your children, 7 and 8. What does it mean to you? She could take them? I said, no, I'm not talking about what she would do. I'm talking about how you feel. When you get up in the morning and you don't see them, what does that mean for you? When you get up and you want to be able to say, come here and do this, they're not, what does that mean? And then he began to realize the reality hitting home, because silently, and he grabbed my hands on, he just started to scream. I don't know if I could be able to make it because I think I'm going to kill myself. And then we had to go into suicidal mode. Because the internalization is what we have been taught as men to suffer in silence. So when you get diagnosis and they begin to have, like the discussion we're having today, the first thing that happens and the burden comes is on the wife or the partner. Because now this individual believes like I'm going to be a death sentence, this is going to happen, that is going to happen. And then they begin to realize that the entire world is not going to come to an end. The second principle I want to leave you here with today is that there is also cultural and societal influences. Historically, there has been mistrust by men about the medical system, but there's also greater mistrust of Black men about the medical system. Have we heard about the Tuskegee studies? Where it is that, all of these individuals they were insulted with the syphilis disease or whatever. We saw the very same thing here in COVID-19, where the intake in the Black community was lowest, particularly in the region of Peel. When we brought out to say, take the vaccination, despite whatever views we had on it, the issue came up very profound that it was lowest in the Peel region and more importantly, among the Black African Caribbean community. Many researchers got. However, when the education started and we started to do, there's an increase in intake and persons who did not necessarily go for the vaccination, but also went to speak to a health practitioner, were able to do different tests to determine how they can keep themselves healthy because now they see it as a need of seeing a physician or someone who are able to provide them with that information. We must agree that our system here in Canada is not always favorable towards the Black and racialized men. And we see it every day when you see people go to test, and there's something called right now with two individuals from Brampton Hospital and another from University of Toronto that are talking about the race correction, ending race correction, because the healthcare that is given to the Black individuals are not the same one that is given to the white. Is the truth. And when we begin to look now around cultural expectation of responsibility, we get into that place where we begin to realize that certain cultures, certain beliefs, certain pieces will tell you, you don't go to medical care, you depend on your natural pieces, you depend on your elders, and you find other alternatives without realizing that the advice from the doctor is the start towards it, and you can do anything else after that. I want to move on to say to you in number 3, that there's a lot of pieces around health and stigma. There's a lot of misconception around health, and people will tell you, oh, you get this, you're going to die. Fail to realize that early detection changes the dynamics. Eating and living healthy changes the dynamics. There's also the piece around that when we start seeing the difficulties with health, people go into that depression and anxiety. And instantly, the doctor will put you on clonazepam or Wellbutrin or Percocet. And I said to them, is there any way you can take a recreational therapy? He said, what does that mean? I said, go back to Jamaica for 2 months. Go back to Jamaica for 2 months. And you're getting the sea, sun, and sun. You're around family and friends. You're getting the good mango, not the one in the store, the real authentic thing. You're getting the real good job. Let me tell you something. When you see it and you smell it, you start to feel better. True or false? And let me tell you, recreational therapy is now becoming a new phenomenon that is saying to people, leave the very space. People are right now, and when I'm working with them who are challenged by the weather, and they begin to say, I'm struggling, winter is coming, seasonal affective disorder. I say, go back home. Go back where you come from, and you begin to see something with the sun and the good food. And if you're coming from Trinidad and Tobago, that roti, the curry alone getting you better. You just smell that thing and you start feeling better. If you've gone to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, give me some more breakfast and jackfish. If you've gone to Grenada, where I was born and raised, that oil down. Let me tell you something. It does something for you. And it's not the oil that cook on the stove that we want to cook outside. You know what I'm talking about? That does something for you. Because culturally, what we want to do is the change of environment does something for the human body. And what we want to tell men is that as we continue into that space, I want us to recognize that we need to break that cycle. And breaking that cycle, we have to redefine masculinity. Telling men that it's okay to cry. Telling men that feeling weak and vulnerable and expressing the pain, or even when they're erectile dysfunctionality or they high blood pressure, because once I see the diabetes, I see it every day when they come to me for sex therapy and we're talking and I say, how things going? And they say, I said, tell me, Gary, you don't found. And we begin to talk about change of diet. Because automatically, once we begin to realize the blood flow is different, I said to them, what has your doctor given to you around the changes you should do? Are you walking? Are you using less sugar? Are you taking care of yourself? Because it's not magic. There's a science behind it. Really find that the body, the muscles, the six-pack are all good, but recognize your intake and recognize the pieces. And that is what is a real man. Then we begin to look at the community support and role models. And today's event is a very good example of this, where individuals who have had those experiences and what they have been through, how we can help you to find the support that you need, because there are people around who are there to say, I have been through this, I understand this, and I know what it feels like. Let me tell you. I can tell and they begin to fail to realize that ultimately when they get sick, if they don't have the network and the support around them, it's always that partner and the children who have to bear the bulk of that burden. And people are now in a state where it's becoming quite tiring, overwhelming, and they're not able to cope. Black African Caribbean community, how they are treated differently. That is why I want to say to you that many of you, and we're partnering with the Walnut Foundation, we are opening the first ever Black Health and Social Services Hub in the region of Peel for the Black African Caribbean community. It has already opened. So you're talking about finding a doctor who is Black, who is coming from that background. So you're telling the doctor what's going on. The doctors, what is this? They know exactly what you're talking about. When I have people coming to me and, they go say, but she how one. They don't know the key to understand. So let's go back. In that space where we look at it here, I want to remind us that when we talk about these principles, another one that we have to do is explore the impact of negative masculinity. I just had a gentleman the other day, 14 years, gave birth to a baby. And he came into my office. Yeah, young boy. 14, and the girl is also 14. They're children. And when I said to him, he said, so you don't understand. You don't understand. The damn thing won't stop crying. So I said to him, remove the batteries. He looked at me. He said, so what do you mean? I said, but you just told me the damn thing doesn't stop crying. So I said, remove the batteries. He said, so, but there ain't no batteries. I said, well, welcome, it's a baby. It's everything. So when they were doing the jig, and they get into that place, they didn't realize it's not a Barbie, nor a teddy bear. It's a real child. And so he wants to play a game. He wants to do all of those pieces without realizing. And I said to him, he says, so it's a big man. I said, well, big man take care of children. Big man, and he cried. So when he comes to the office, he says, is my father there? And I said to him, I didn't make you. I didn't make this. He said, yes, he's my father. And he comes with that space, whenever he gets into difficulties at the office with the hypermasculine, with the anger and the frustration, the teacher calls me and I said to him, what are my expectations? He said, okay, so I'll behave. Okay, Dad. And he comes back and he said, I was pissed, But what happened is that intergenerationally, his mother gave birth to him at 29. The other mother gave birth at 41. Are you seeing what I'm talking about? We need to break the cycle. And here we are. He said to me, I'm a man. And this young man is growing up. And I've had 2 other cases just like this. And by the time he was 17, he had 8 children. Right here. And when I said to him, he said, I'm a real man. So he's a man. Masculinity, that's why it gets to be very toxic, because the health and the societal advantage is that there is no accountability and support. And when these young people come for counseling or therapy, having seen this for over 23 years, I can tell you all class. As I wrap up, I want to bring you into that space where this diagram, when I went to India a few years ago on my first trip, one of the things that Srilata, she talked about, who's an expert in working with gender-based violence, she reminded us that when a society is built on patriarchal ideology, which promotes men over women, and a system, and those of you who go to India, you'll see the very presence of, some women still can't even sit in front of the vehicles. They still sit at the back. The patriarchal norm says that as a woman, you're expected to do this, you're expected to do that, but as a man, there's no rule for you. You could do whatever you want. But the societal piece is that socialization is being taught in a negative way by our schools, our religion, the law, the state, and people are not getting the correct information as it relates to who and what should they learn about being a man. Because I can tell you, when I run the groups for men, I run a group now for Black fathers with Children's Aid. These are men who don't have access to their children. And I say to them, what is your greatest challenge on an everyday basis? And they tell me about the system and the system. I say, let's do the system alone. We can't change it. But what can we change? They say not being there in that presence and allowing my children to grow up in this environment. I therefore say to us today, before we take in a few more questions, there has to be a distinction between the 2 levels of our society. When we talk about masculinity and patriarchy, there are 2 differences. Masculinity is the way in which we behave, the mannerism, the things we do. And it's okay to have positive masculinity once we do not embed it in patriarchy. Because when patriarchal system come in, I've seen men who have gotten into that space and have gotten terribly and figure, I'm in charge. They don't have respect for a female boss. And I've been in this country for so long, and every one of my bosses have always been female. And I've learned so much. Therefore, as I bring you into that last phase of my slide, I want to end this presentation today by saying to us that the system we're living, when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about men's health, we're talking about masculinity. We cannot use the very system that we have now and expect men to come into circles for mindfulness. Then men go fall asleep. When you tell men come into groups, that's not what they want to do. So I'm saying to us here that when we begin to talk about prostate cancer, we have to find a different approach. We cannot use the Eurocentric or the white way of doing it. We have to find a way that is decolonizing, using our very Afrocentric pieces, using the pieces that is built on, you see, when I talk about food and this, when we talk about the Black African Caribbean community, I'm saying to us here, we have to understand our common values, our experiences, our interpretation from our descendants and indigenous identity. And more so, recognizing that we do this from an intersectional lens rather than from the world view of how the white. That's why when people go to a doctor, and I say that to Black folks every day, if you go to the doctor and the moment the doctor starts asking you, so tell me, have you had an abortion? They will answer because you feel very interrogated. And you know what is known in the Black African Caribbean community? We will lie. We will tell you just what you need to know to get in the line. And 4 months down the line, when we feel a bit more comfortable, we will start telling you what I told you was really true, But because I didn't trust you. I didn't trust you. And you come in and ask me some of the most evasive personal questions on day one. That's what the Eurocentric system does. But when we do it from a decolonizing, next slide, we are breaking a place where we can trust is an important factor. And in that trust, what it does for us is that it tells us that we need to engage in the most intimate part of us through dialogue and conversation. We need to assume that the intervention will benefit us. In other words, don't just tell me to take this. Why are you taking that? You need to tell me. You need to give me information. And the final slide says to us here that as we begin to do this, you will start asking yourself, how does masculinity, how does health, mental health come all together? And I leave you with the rock. What is it that men are standing on? And what is it that men need to stand on in order for them to be able to address this? The leaf, what is it that you want to encourage men to leave behind? And what is it you want men to stick with as we talk about the rock, the leaf, and the stick? I know there's some questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
So there's a question online. So there's a question online. Is it not generally accepted that male identity includes an essential, authentic expression of masculinity, which should not be compromised? In essence, we need to strike a balance and avoid taking measures and narratives that would ultimately deprive our men of their masculine identity. Your thoughts?
This is exactly what we talk about in the video, because when we define masculinity, we have to first define what do we mean by masculinity. Because if we take, and that's why I gave the definition at the end, because I anticipated questions like this will come up. If we are teaching men that masculinity is about strength and dominance and being in control, and this is the only aspect that we teach without showing the other side around vulnerability, around the fact that you can be able to express emotions, then we are not creating a balance. And in psychological terms, we say we are creating dissonance for the man, because he only learned you must be strong, but he doesn't learn that even in your strength, when you feel pain, when you knock your foot, you don't just say that hurts. When you realize that the difficulty with the health and the diagnosis that you get, you realize that it may take you, but how do I move from there? And in doing that piece around the evaluation, you're not necessarily saying that you're not a man. What you're saying is that there is a holistic part of you, and the strength part is just one. And suffice to say that oftentimes a lot of persons from the Black African Caribbean community, they say when we bring in some of this new kind of ideological perspective, we're trying to shift men to become women. And I say to them, if that's the case, then that's a good thing, because some men will become a lot more loving, will become a lot more caring. They will learn what it means to hold hands and to embrace, and learn the side of them that is okay to hug and touch and feel, because that is also a part of being a man. And the media portrayal has been one of the most influential pieces around how men are taught who they should be and how they come. Look at the songs. Look at the way in which men are portrayed. For example, when we look at advertising and we want to be able to appeal to the particular men, what is it we use for the advertising and the branding? Sex. All of these kinds of images disproportionately around women and around, where we personified women in those pieces, and that is what attracts. Whereas when we can see a good man and say, you know what, brother, I love you, I care about you, I support you, because we are not taught to verbalize those things. How many persons today is growing up in environments where when I ask them, who taught you what to love? And they said to me, sir, I'm 46, and I've never, ever heard my father say, I love you. Just think about that. Just let that resonate for a moment. And when they go into relationships, and I said to the woman, she said, I know he loved me. I know he cared about me. And I said to her, has he ever told you? So
I just want to add to that. When do you ever ask men, do you ever see your dad cry?
Mm-hmm. That's another example of it as well.
Any?
We must not neglect the fact that although the tradition from where we're coming from as a Black person, our father in Jamaica, most of it would never say I love you, but they display love. They display everything called love, and you could feel it. I remember I was going away to Canada, and I tell my father I was going, and my father go to the cornfield and he cut some corn and he boiled the corn, and I cry. I've never seen so much love in all my life. I cry. So that's display of love. He may not verbally say, I love you, son, but that's what he displayed. I cry for hours. I was wet when I see my father go cut those corn, boil it, and say, eat, son. That's love.
And where we agree, and I wouldn't dispute the fact that even my father, who's a Trinidadian, he showed us love. He demonstrated it. There was always provision, making sure we get an education. And I am today what I am because of my father's. But what we're talking about is that as society and the dynamics change, making sure that we are able to verbalize it to our children in terms of embrace and in terms of the amount of persons who don't do that as opposed to those who do it is disproportionately different. And what we want to encourage is to do the activities, but also verbalize it. In essence, incorporate. So you make that sandwich, don't just put cheese, but put meat and other things and make sure you serve it well.
Thank you. So thank you very much. One more question.
Last question. Okay.
Last question.
Sorry.
Dr. Gargrave. I practice in an area at Young and not Young, Eglinton and Kiel area.
Mhm.
I've been in Canada since city. But from my experience, I'm finding out that in many cases, the father should be the one that should have custody and a better of the two parents. Also, in mixed marriages, there is a high percentage where the fathers are not considered to the same extent. I think things are changing now.
Significant.
And there are men now that are getting custody for
And say that I'm capable. They're realizing the shift that there are a lot of persons who are men who are better parents and doing a better job in those ways. My encouragement is to tell men, do not say they're going to wait until 18 when the child gets older to come back. The child needs you at those formative years. And if you put yourself out there as a good parent, as a capable parent, you might be able to get not only joint, but even full custody because your children do not just want the presence, they want your presence. And that makes a difference, especially in the life of homes where we constantly see the challenges with gangs and these, and they always say about the absentee father. We can change coaching and support. And what it does, it gives an independent opinion in a way that is safe, a way that is brave, and they might just be surprised how well the masculinities and thoughts and others can be helped by persons like myself and others who are willing, ready, and able to help them to navigate pieces, mental health, suicide, men's issues, because what matters is having that body who can be able to encourage, empower, in a Black environment that is decolonized. It's safe, it's brave, and it allows them to speak with someone who looks and talks like them and be able to create the reality. I say a she.